hardware stuff, or are we trying some other new stuff now? Bueller? Anybody have anything to report? Anything went well? Anything you were trying?
I failed. You know, it's just, I don't know why sometimes your focus is not where it needs to be. And all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, how did you do that?
Yeah. Okay. Is there any way, anything you can do to be more successful, do you think, this week?
You know, if I maybe get some alerts, you know, we all have devices that will keep us or anything related to that. And I actually should try to focus on structuring that so
Yep.
that it keeps me oriented.
Yeah, I have a few different level of alerts on my phone, depending on how seriously I want to do that thing. And so, if I have an alarm set on my phone, then it's definitely going to happen because it's going to go off. It's going to make me do the thing. If I have a calendar event, sometimes it'll happen. Yeah, it just kind of depends on how helpful those things are and what level of attention they are getting each day.
I'm not smart enough to put that on my phone, Thomas.
Mm-hmm. How do you ensure that you get your habits continually reinforced?
You know that I'm OCD to the max.
Mm-hmm.
I've got probably 50 post-its on my desk and walls, and I write on my calendar before the thing. I get up at 2 o'clock in the morning where I have to stay in my office, and so what is there to do is Bible study first. Sure.
So it sounds like you have a paper calendar that you're
Yeah, I know my business.
using very hard.
That's how I know Malachi's birthday is not coming.
And I have a reminder on my phone. Any other reports from this past week? Things going well? Things going poorly?
It may be silly, but bring up a card expense.
Yeah.
My slide rule. It's important, it's on the RAM side. So getting my scrivener in and out is not possible at the moment.
Yeah.
So, also tell me fixed on Tuesday. Seems so good.
No, that's not so bad.
I forgot this Wednesday, Thomas, I'm meeting with this orthopedic surgeon over at Bellevue to see if they'll do the arthroscopic surgery to sever my right hand. I'm really hoping he would.
Yep. It's on Wednesday. Anything else? All right. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this opportunity to come here and gather together, to study and to worship. Lord, help us to gather around your scriptures and to learn and understand from you and the servants that have come before us how to honor you and how you want your kingdom. Lord, help us to be people that are faithful and resilient in the face of many challenges we have around us. Lord, we want to pray especially for Carrie's car and just her vehicle gets fixed quickly and she's able to use it fully again. Pray just that we can reach out to make sure she has all the help she needs getting around until then. Lord, we pray for Jan and his upcoming meeting with the surgeon. Pray that mindful of these habits and disciplines that we need to work on, that they would come readily to our mind, and that we would be able to practice them fully and just get a little bit better at them tomorrow than we are today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So last week we talked about charity, and this week we're again talking about charity. And the reason is I wanted to touch on a couple more things that we didn't talk about last week, and just round out this topic with a few thoughts and ideas. And so, if you remember last week, we talked about charity as giving, and as we kind of interpreted it through this biblical lens of Torah as this practice of ensuring that people who are in need have enough, and that comes from your overflow. And so you are preparing it all parts of your life to have enough on the margin to support those who might need help. But also you are, like, whether you're a wealthy landowner or you yourself are poor, you can continue to live in this generous way where you are leaving margin for people that you can help. Not that you'll always be able to help people when opportunities arise, but rather that you're living life in such a way that's a very common occurrence and ability for you because of how you live. And so to continue on this idea, I just want to turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 15 really quick. And just think about this idea one more time. Remember, Torah is often translated law, but it can also be translated as instruction or wisdom. It's this whole set of ideas and the way I think about it is the way that God wants his kingdom running. And so even though this is part of the Old Covenant, I think we can find a lot of wisdom here in the way that we approach our own lives. So Deuteronomy chapter 15 is about the Sabbath year. And so they have this idea that you would, at the end of every 7 years, you would have a year where you're letting your fields lie fallow. Does anybody know why you would want to do that? Why you would fallow your fields?
It returns nutrients to the ground, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
We call it crop rotation, but it's similar.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you don't do this, then you degrade the quality of your soil, and eventually your plants will not grow very well at all, right? And so the whole point is that in the same way that humans need rest, God's whole cosmos needs rest, and that's what this is meant to do. It's meant to build in this rest into their lives. And so let the land rest, and then you rest, and then the following year you get back after it. And I guess there's lots to this, but just to understand that, like, restoration is the key thing that's in view here, right? The land needs to be restored, and this is one of the ways that God is providing for them to restore the land. Now, we never see the Israelites observe a Sabbath year. It's not to say that they didn't, but we don't see that carried out in Scripture. And I think one of the messages there is that they are not trusting in God's restoration, or they're not fully on board with this idea of restoration. And why wouldn't you want to rest? Why wouldn't you want to rest? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you're not as productive, right? Fields aren't as productive. Takes a lot of planning on the front end to rest. Right? You have to get a bunch of stuff done ahead of time so that you can rest.
I think in our world,
this is a pattern that we've seen all throughout human history. It might be, especially an issue for us. But yeah, welcome. We have a note sheet there if you want to grab one. We're in Deuteronomy chapter 15. And then the other reason you might not want to rest is what happens if your neighbor doesn't rest and you do rest?
It's gonna be in ahead of me.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that, some people look at it as a boast. Look at all of it.
Mhm.
I don't even take a rest,
Mhm.
and to me, that's more an art form than that. And like being human people, it probably does tend to.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're taking a year off to let the land rest and to let your crops rest, and your neighbor doesn't, are their lands going to go fallow that year, or are their crops going to fail that year? No, no. Well, maybe slightly less productive, but they're going to be fine. They're going to get ahead. They're going to have more. You might suffer some loss and go into debt, right? And then suddenly you need to borrow from them. They've been working hard, and right? And suddenly, oh, I got to sell some of my land to them. Oh, suddenly, if I try to take another Sabbath year in 7 years, then they might take more land from you, right? It's like this whole cycle.
So is everyone in the same 7-year cycle?
Yeah, that's the idea that's laid out in the Torah. That it's meant to be a rest for the community, for the land, for all of Israel. It's supposed to be the Sabbath rest.
So if you didn't rest, were you looked down on by the community?
Again, we don't see them actually doing this in practice. This is a tall order, right? To say don't work for a year. For us, I can't imagine stopping work. I'm trying to take a Sabbath in a few years. We're planning on it right now. But it's probably not going to be a year long, because I don't know if we can manage that. I'd like to. I think that would be a great experience to go through. But yeah, it's a lot to figure out, and to just stop everything and to let things rest. Yeah.
This whole concept, we started out charity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know my wife's garden, cherry tomatoes. We planted like one, and they grew to like thousands.
Yeah.
And they were like blackberry bushes, you couldn't get rid of them.
Yeah.
Every year they come back. Finally, I think we've eradicated them. It took several years, though, but the point is not letting the land, even though you're letting the land rest, there's seeds in the soil that are gonna grow.
Yep.
And that was for the poor.
And for yourself. And so it's you don't go and intentionally plant crops. You're not clearing your field out. You're just letting it lie, and whatever it produces, it produces. But the whole idea is that you've saved up ahead of time, right? You have a lot of stuff pickled, and a lot of stuff jarred, and a lot of stuff salted, and a lot of stuff ready, so that you can get through this year. And so another point that's super important to understand here is that the Sabbath year is also a year of elimination of debts. Okay, so Deuteronomy 15:1. At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a remission of debts. This is the manner of remission. Every creditor shall release what he has loaned to his neighbor. He shall not exact it of his neighbor and his brother, because the Lord's remission has been proclaimed. From a foreigner you may extract it, but your hand shall release whatever of yours is with your brother. However, there will be no poor among you, since the Lord will surely bless you in the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess. If you only listen obediently to the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all this commandment which I am commanding you today. So what's the command here? What's that?
Listen to the voice of the Lord when he's coming.
Okay, and what's that voice telling them?
Yep.
Yep.
Instead of everything. And the creditor has
6-year loans, right? As someone who has gotten a couple of 30-year loans, that sounds nice, right? 6-year loan, it's a lot more doable.
Wasn't there a special jubilee at 49 years, 50 years?
Yep.
What was the difference of that from the others?
So every 7 Sabbaths, not only did you forgive your debts, but you also restored all the property amongst the tribes. So, and the whole point of that was that, again, it's meant to be this restoration that restores the land back to when the Israelites first entered, right? It restores those boundaries that you read in Joshua that kind of make your eyes glaze over because they're like reading a map to you. But that's why it's there, is to help them understand that this is how it was originally set up, and this is, it doesn't matter how ambitious Judah is, they're never going to have more than what they had originally when we first started this. That was the purpose. But again, we don't see them actually doing that practice. So we already talked about going into the Sabbath year, how challenging that would be practically. Would it be very helpful if you could call in some debts to make the Sabbath year happen?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it'd be great if we could get all that money, or if I could continue to get this steady income from these loans that I've lent out to my neighbors, right? But the rule is, no, all these debts will be forgiven on this day. And so why? Why is this the law? Why does God want it this way? Why does he want his kingdom laid out like this?
All of us, they need to rely on him and be prepared and follow, listen to his voice. His plans are good for us. And to not gouge your neighbor, to be loving and kind and generous, like Christ God is.
Mhm.
Like God is blessing them, he wants them to bless each other.
Yeah, if I'm a wealthy landowner and I have several people that I've lent out money to, Sabbath, pretty easy to observe, right? Sabbath year, because I just keep that coming in. But what's that mean for all those people? They don't get a Sabbath year, right? And so God's very explicit here. He's saying that this rest is for you, but it's also for the poor. It's also for everybody that's here. Okay?
Well, I think it's a cool, because so as I'm sitting here reading it, you're asking why, and I was like, well, it's to show extreme dependence. Oh, no, okay. It's to show dependence on God, not an extreme dependence. It seems extreme because of how we set up our lives now, right? But it's how dependence was supposed to be. All of these things are God's to begin with, right? We are using them out of what he has allowed us. All of these, the earth is his, the people are his, they are representation of him. And I think it's a way for us to be shown, or his people to be shown, or at least brought back to that thought, right? After a certain amount of time, bring them back to that sort of thought.
Mhm.
Seems like this also, in parables we see canceling debt is teaching us something about God and about his ultimate canceling debts, our debt.
Mhm.
It seems like it's if we, like what we were talking about, if this is case law, then it's teaching us something about the character of God.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the coolest ministries that I've read about recently is this. Some churches will go and buy medical debt from creditors, and then they'll just forgive the debt because it's very cheap to do that, right? You could buy $10,000 of medical debt for $1,000, and then forgive it, or even less, because nobody expects to actually collect on all that debt. But I like that idea, not just because it's a kind thing to do, but because it's right along these lines, right? It's a let's keep reading because there's a few more verses I want to get to here. For the Lord your God will bless you as he promised you, and you will lend to many nations, but you will not borrow, and you will rule over many nations, but they will not rule over you. If there is a poor man with you, one of your brothers in any of your towns in your land which the Lord your God has given you, you shall not harden your heart nor close your hand from your brother, but you shall freely open your hand to him, and shall generously lend him sufficient for his need in whatever he lacks. Beware that there is no base thought in your heart, saying, the seventh year, the year of remission, is near, and your eye is hostile towards your poor brother, and you give him nothing. Then he may cry to the Lord against you, and it will be a sin in you. You should generously give to him, and your heart shall not be grieved when you give to him, because for this thing the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and all your undertakings. For the poor will never cease to be in the land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall freely open your hand to your brother, your needy and poor in your land. And then it goes on to this extreme. Not only are they to forgive debts, but they're also to release anybody who's bound to them in like a debt servitude. And so what? Again, thinking of this through charity, through this idea that we've been thinking about this morning. What else do you see here that's significant for us to consider?
This is a tangent thought. This is one of the key points of the prophets. How the Israelites saw it as their mistreatment of the poor. So, like you said, there's not much evidence they really held this close and performed it. They actually did the opposite of the rest of the poor.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's too common thread in Scripture. You do see some Israelites honoring this, right? Men like Boaz are trying to carry this out, but a lot of the leaders, a lot of the people, that's the number one. Number one and number two is you are not treating the poor and the widow and the orphan well. They're suffering in your midst. And then number two is you are chasing after idols, right? And it's the cry of the prophets. And so it's no wonder that Jesus says that the two most important commands are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, and then the second is like it, to love your neighbor. Right? So it's here. This charity is kind of baked into everything, and so that's why I'm trying to emphasize that so much. Okay, so now thinking through charity, let's bring this forward to the present, into the new covenant. Let's turn over to Luke chapter 10. Do 25, right? So he gets quizzed by this teacher of the law, and he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said to him, well, what's written in the law? How do you read it? Which is a great question, and he answers correctly, right? Gives Jesus his number one and number two, and he says, yeah, so just do that and you'll live. And the lawyer has a follow-up question. Well, who is my neighbor? Right? And if you're an Israelite, who is your neighbor? Israelites. Right? So like, the northern kingdom as well, right? Yeah, and that's the whole problem, right? Is that your neighbor is the children of Abraham, right? And we saw that distinction even in Deuteronomy, that you're to forgive these debts for insiders, but not for outsiders. And that might seem harsh, but it's also like, well, if you want the good stuff, come and join the party, right? Come on in, and you can be one of us too. Not that that was a big emphasis emphasis, but the whole idea is that for Israel, they're this different place, right? You can go there and you can be somebody who's poor, but you don't suffer every moment of your life because God's people are taking care of those people in a way that's not done elsewhere. Again, whether that was carried out very well, beside the point. The point is that this is how God wants it. And then we see here, right, he has this question, well, who is my neighbor? And the Assyrians come in, and they wreck and destroy the northern kingdom. And then the most famous thing that they do is that they actually take all their foreign people and they bring them to Israel, and they take all the Israelites and take them out, and then they all intermarry, and then you're stuck with Samaritans, right? And so Samaritans are just people from Samaria, but this becomes synonymous with a person of mixed blood, people of mixed heritage from foreign nations. They worship foreign gods. Everything's all mixed and confused up there. And so, is that my neighbor?
They were also instructed to do that.
Instructed to do what?
To intermarry, when they were taken captive, one of the prophets said you should make this your home, because this can be your home. And I don't know now where it is, but they were told to do that.
So they're told to take wives for their sons, but I think the implication is not that they're to intermarry with the people that they're among. They're to continue to live their lives amongst each other, take wives from your fellow Israelites. It doesn't explicitly say that. I think it's in Jeremiah, which will probably say that more. But yeah, and then they have to kind of deal with the consequences of that in Ezra, Nehemiah later, right, when they return from exile and there's all these foreign wives and all these families. It's a little unclear whether the solution that they're supposed to divorce these women is a good solution. God doesn't ever say that that's what he wanted. That's just what the prophet comes up with. Now, but pulling it back now, what's Jesus' answer? Who is my neighbor? Right? Somebody lay the story of the Good Samaritan on me. The one who shows mercy. And so, talk a little bit more. So say a little bit more, because sometimes we think about the Good Samaritan as I think it sometimes gets jumbled in our heads. So like unpack it a little bit for us. Why did Jesus tell this story, and who's the Good Samaritan?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think maybe we were preaching on it a couple of weeks ago, right? Because all these guys who pass by letter of the law, they appear to be making the correct choice, right? Not touching a dead body and that sort of thing, right? Whereas the Samaritan, right, who by
who is the person?
It's a wounded person, how do we know?
It's an Israelite, right?
Okay.
And it's the priest's job to do some of that, right? And the Levites, like if anybody knows the law, if anybody knows who's supposed to take care of that, then it should be them.
So it was their brother.
Their brother, right?
It was
Not just their neighbor, but like,
part of their
Yeah.
community was somebody they may even have known.
right, yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I may be just straining an ad here. But the question originally was, and who is my neighbor? But Jesus comes down and says, which of these three do you think proved to be a neighbor?
Mhm.
So the real message, it seems, that it's not about who's my neighbor as much as who am I being a good neighbor to.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get at, is that he turns the question around and also makes this person that seems like the enemy, he's actually the hero in the story, but actually he's the one that is properly putting the commandments that this lawyer knew, right? He knew the number one, the number two, but only the Samaritan is the one who's able to actually live this out in this way, because he has aligned his life to properly live in this way. Whereas the priests and the Levites, like, yeah, I'm sure they have obligations under the law and all these other things, but they didn't properly organize their life in a way that is charitable to this person who's in need. So they aren't being the neighbor, but this other one is. Any other comments on that? So the last thing I want to look at is thinking about this in terms of discipleship. So that's what we've been doing several weeks now, is like, how do we put these things into practice? How do we build habits around these important things that we see here in the Sermon on the Mount, these core habits of charity, prayer, and fasting. And so for charity, I just wanted to mention a couple things. And so the first is that you can be charitable at any level of the economic status that you're at, right? We see that in Jesus' parable of the widow with two mites, and all these kinds of ideas. I think we would all agree that that's true. What I would also say is that as you are growing in your skills and in your abilities and in your personhood, the wise thing to do with stewardship is to grow your ability, both financially and like your scope should grow as you go. That's going to look different for everybody, but if you're in the same spot that you were 5 years ago, and you haven't expanded those abilities, then it seems to me that this parable of the talents should be convicting you that I'm not growing these things that God has given me, and so that might be a problem. That doesn't mean that your portfolio needs to be 10x in 10 years or whatever, but rather that wherever your financial status is, like your ability to manage and handle those finances, but also your time and your energy and effort, like all that stuff should be growing as a disciple. It's just good stewardship over what God's given you. Does that make sense? And so to get there, I think it just takes discipline in a lot of ways. Like our culture, one of the advantages of living in our culture is that we've set up the game to be pretty fair if you exercise certain discipline in your life, right? If you are able to live within your means, if you're able to set up a budget, if you're able to figure out some of these financial things, then your ownership over your finances and the things in your life will grow over time. Not to say that it always grows or you're promised to grow in that way, but it's important to that point you made. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? say is that, like any other discipline, financial discipline will lead to more freedom, but it'll also lead to more opportunities to bless others. That's what I'm trying to say. And so I think that starts with realizing that, you know, if you've never exercised discipline in that area, it starts with realizing that you're kind of a mess, right? You're probably in some sort of financial mess. And to sort that mess out initially, it takes just a little bit of learning and work with people who are better at those things than you are, right? And so if you've not gone through like a financial discipline class, like Dave Ramsey has I can't remember what his program's called. Financial Peace University. So that's a great program to help you set up a budget, to help you start saving, to help you get your life in order. And again, I just want to emphasize that I'm not saying that if you are struggling financially that you're spiritually less. I'm rather saying that by exercising some of these disciplines, you're actually honoring the things that God has given to you. You're honoring God and what He's given to you by being a good steward over those things. And I think sometimes, especially when you're poor, or when you're struggling financially, it's like easier to say, well, I just don't care about these things. They're not important to me. And again, the point isn't that it should be super important to you, but rather that by exercising discipline, you can actually gain more freedom. You can be more effective in this community and this kingdom if you have discipline over your resources. The second thing, as you build those disciplines, is that throughout the whole thing, you just need to build this non-hoarding mindset. And so the whole idea is that as you build wealth, you don't want to start tearing down barns and building bigger barns so you can have more stuff, but rather think of it as, again, a field with a margin. And as you grow your field, as you grow your ability to manage larger and larger things, it's like, how can I continue to keep this stuff moving through me, right? You're a conduit to bless other people is kind of how you should think about it. And so it's not, how do I stuff more into the bank and make that number grow, but rather, how do I get the throughput higher so I can be a blessing to my neighbor? And just like there was a distinction made in Deuteronomy, we don't have this dividing wall of hostility between Gentiles and Jews anymore, but we still do have an inside and an outside when it comes to the church. And so if we are not taking care of people in the church at the expense of, if we are taking care of people outside the church at the expense of people inside the church, then I think that we're doing a disservice, because that speaks of our values and our priorities. And really, in the same way, I think we have this responsibility to be a witness to the community, to the people around us, to say that there's no poor among us. And we practice that by this radical generosity and sharing and helping people that are around us. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
One thing that brings out huge as well as that observing is that God and His family, His church, it shows He's providing for all the ways that people are in the church as a family, like a brothers and sisters.
there's levels to all these things. And I think that mindset's possible whether you're rich or poor, right? Whether you have a lot or a little. For me, like, I guess I can only really speak to myself, like my own experience, is when I do have that trust, when I do go out and give generously, when I feel like I'm being called to do that, the Lord always provides. Like he doesn't leave me hanging. That isn't to say that I always need to be giving everything away, but when there is those opportunities and when it is clear that this is something that needs to be done, God has never let me down, and whether I expect it or not, it's just but we need to fill this need. I hope this works out, and it works out.
Well, I think, I'm hearing that you're really focusing on money,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of ways you can support, your time, use your time generously for others. Like, I'll just give you a quick example. I know of several families that were in a situation to where they actually needed desperately someone to be able to take care of their children. And you step up and do it, and the church does that. Even if you have to schedule it out to everybody in the church, take 2 hours or whatever. It can be done, and it has been done very successfully. And that, materials, I mean, some of us have tools, all kinds of stuff. It's just not limited to money.
Yep.
It's your mindset, it's your heart.
Yep.
Because first you give yourself to the Lord, willing sacrifices. And that's what we are, sacrificing each other also.
Yep. And I guess we'll leave it here because we're 2 minutes over now. But the thing that I want to emphasize is that takes discipline too. Right? If I don't have discipline over my own calendar, then there's no way I have 2 hours to give to somebody this week that needs the help. But if I've exercised discipline in my life where I've left this margin and I have this ability and willingness and habit of giving, then yeah, suddenly that's an option that I can do. Whereas if I'm a slave to my schedule and a slave to the people around me, then not so much. All right, let's say a quick prayer, and how about you do your comment, and then you can say a prayer.
We had a very generous neighbor, and she owns a pastry shop in Mercer Island, and she's given us pastries before to give the church, and there's some out there to share.
Awesome. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for all of the men and women that are here this morning. Help us to be generous disciples. Help us to continue to practice this mindset of loving our neighbor, as well as the discipline of managing all the resources that you've given to us, whether they've been money or time,